Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our second Applied AI in Engineering and Computer Science Symposium. Thank you very much for coming. You're all, it's a pleasure to have you all in here, of course. And I'm Edgar Lobaton. I'm a professor in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering here at NC State, and also chair of the Applied AI Committee. And I'm excited to see so many of our faculty, our staff, students, industry, and other university partners also here with us today. And to be able to hear about some of our efforts on leading AI from our experts, as well as helping us discuss basically what's going to be the future of applied AI within the college as well, too. So before getting started, I wanted to go over a couple of things in terms of a few announcements. You all have access to our agendas. So of course, you see it here, but you have it on your table as well, too. There's also a QR in case you want to take a quick look at that as well. So you'll get all the details about all the events and when they're going to happen, of course, at the location. All of the events, including the breakout session and also the launch and the poster sessions, are going to happen either in this room or right outside. So you don't need to go too far. For general questions about the agenda and any other type of technical concerns as well, too, you're welcome to reach out to our registration table, which you already saw them right outside. We'll have somebody there that can help you out with those questions. We're also launching a Discord server for faculty, staff, and students to discuss topics on AI in engineering and computer science, of course, and to help us kind of do some networking and identify potential collaborations moving forward as well. Anything related from research all the way to education and potential infrastructure and administration a little bit later as well. So you probably all received an email from me earlier today. So I just put the QR code in here and the link as well too, in case you want to take a look at it. But you probably got that in your mailbox as well too. So you're welcome to join in there. We're going to have somebody kind of helping us out, make sure that people are getting accepted into the system, into the server as we move forward. Okay. Now let me introduce our keynote speaker. So let me switch computers really quick. It is my honor to introduce our keynote speaker, Phaedra Boinodiris. She's a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts and co-founder of IBM Consulting's Responsible AI Practice, a leading voice for inclusion in technology. She also serves on North Carolina's AI Leading Council and is the author of the AI for the Rest of Us, named the #1 book to read in 2024 by Constellation Research. Let's welcome our speaker.
I am so honored to be here with you today. This is going to be a very interactive session. So if you would mind bringing out your cell phones, because you're going to need them to answer some polling questions. Okay. All right. So my day job is that I help clients curate AI in a responsible way. But before I get into the subject of AI ethics and governance and safe guardrails, I want to make a plug for play. If you haven't had the opportunity to play with newer forms of AI, let this be your invitation. My background before joining IBM is I had been working in the gaming industry for many, many years. And I have found that by using play, I have not only had an opportunity to see firsthand what is the opportunity with AI, but also what are the limitations. So I'm going to share a personal story. So both, again, my husband and I are really interested in games, and we have 4 children. And ever since the kids were little, we would design little puzzles and games that the kids had to unlock in order to get their Christmas presents. Right? I know, this is totally sadistic, but it turned into this game, right? And of course, they're totally different interests, different ages. And as the kids got older, these puzzles and games necessarily had to get more and more sophisticated. We had to start designing these starting at Thanksgiving, right? I mean, that's how sophisticated they had to get. We had this entire library on cryptography, for God's sake. I mean, by the time these kids are ready, they'll be so primed to join the NSA, it's not even fun. So when GenAI was first coming out, I thought, okay, I have this great idea. I'm going to see if generative AI can help us make these puzzles, these games, a lot faster, so we're not, every weekend toiling over this. And it worked pretty well in terms of, sophisticated prompt, the different interests of the kids, the different ages. It came up with sort of an outline of the gameplay, and even like this Uber puzzle that all the kids had to sort of pull together in order to be able to unlock at the end. It got riddles really well, but when it came to things like breaking codes or wordplay, it would say things like there are no letter E's in the word there, right? Again, because large language models, it's predicting the next syntactically correct word in the sentence. So again, play is a great way to really uncover what is the opportunity. So I also, in addition to being statistic with my kids with games, I weld and I do painting. I do a lot of volunteer work with kids, not just higher ed, but also middle school and high school to introduce the subject of AI and AI ethics with them. So the reason we're talking about AI is there is a huge opportunity when it comes to things like bringing innovation and bringing value within organizations, and a tremendous amount of investment being put in. I'm going to ask some questions of you. If you wouldn't mind, take a picture of this QR code, because I want to hear a lot from you. And I've been on the road a lot, so I'm going to show you what people in other parts of the world are thinking too near the end of my presentation today. All right. What's one word that captures your biggest hope for artificial intelligence today? And you can see there's a code at the top in case you didn't have time to take a picture of the QR. Just go to menti.com and put in that code. Lots of efficiency, lots of useful productivity. Okay? Now, what's one word that reflects your biggest worry? Terminator. My Black Mirror. Malicious acts, superintelligence, mistakes, unpredictable, ethics. All right. Generative AI is not the only form of artificial intelligence. Just want to make that really, really clear. There's many different forms of AI. You've got predictive AI, AI that can inform or guide you, generative AI, AI that can create, whether it's text or audio or video. And of course, now agentic AI, AI that can execute on your behalf. It is incredibly important to understand this, to recognize that there are different forms of artificial intelligence in order to be able to craft the appropriate fit-for-purpose safeguard rail. So I'm going to ask you some questions. And as I ask these questions of you, the way I want you to approach thinking about it is, as you're thinking about these different forms of AI, if you sense that the AI that is being described to you is an agent, right? Because as you move forward to the right, this is where more risk is. I want you to say agent. But you can have absolutely an agent have components of both generative as well as predictive, okay? All right, so I want you to name that AI. Continuously monitors stock prices, plans trades to hit cash targets, and executes the trades within allowed guardrails. Is it predictive, generative, or agentic? Okay. Yeah, the answer is agentic because it is executing the trade within allowed guardrails. Absolutely, it will have components of predictive. We even have components of generative in there. But it's important to recognize that this is an agent because it executes. HR tool that creates job descriptions given a role title and bullets in the company's tone, plus a shorter version for LinkedIn. Okay. Generative. Absolutely correct. Flags which stores will run out of fish and potatoes next week so managers can reorder while also providing a confidence per store. Very good. Good. Depending on which analyst you believe, between 75 to 85% of investments get stalled. They fail. They don't produce a return. And according to the analysts, this is because of three core reasons. Number one is that the initial investment in AI wasn't actually tied to solving a business problem. It's not solving a problem. The second common reason for failure is that there's an inappropriate level of trust in the outputs. Either people are overly trusting, or they do not trust it at all. Right? And then the third common reason for failure is a lack of skills and literacy. And I don't just mean a lack of skills and literacy in terms of how do I use this in my job in order to be more productive. I'm talking about a lack of skills and literacy in terms of designing and developing, deploying, and governing AI in a way that is worthy of people's trust. There's several stories that have really compelled me to work in the space of AI ethics and governance, as I'm sure it has many of you as well. And these stories are, this predates generative AI. This is all predictive AI, right? So again, I don't want you to think that it's just agents or generative AI that has the risks, okay? For example, the state of Michigan, they have procured an AI to predict welfare fraud. It ran for a period of 3 years with an accuracy score of less than 10%. And people knew. There were people who knew how low that was. Right? So you had all these families being brought into court and erroneously fined. Right? Again, great intentions, due to lack of skills and literacy and understanding in the safeguard rails, they ended up causing inadvertent harm. Another example, several regions within the country of Spain, they had procured an AI, their police departments procured an AI to predict the recidivism of domestic abusers. The way this would work is someone would get interviewed by the police about an incident, and the police would put in the suspect's information into the system, and the system would give a score. If the score was high enough, the police would put a protective order in place. If the score was too low, they wouldn't do anything. And it was only well after a dozen people lost their lives, were murdered by their partners, that there was ever an audit done on the model. Right? Some of the findings from the audit, which is publicly available for you to look at, includes an assumption that whoever had designed this or built this assumed that if a concern or a complaint or an incident had come from a wealthy household, they could devalue the risk. And again, you ask any social worker, they'll be the first to tell you, domestic abuse happens across the entire socioeconomic strata. Right? Another thing that came out of the audit was that if someone lied to the police about abuse and said, the reason I have this black eye is I slipped, my face hit the sink, and then came back a month later to say, I need police protection, that person would have to get a lawyer to get their score changed. And again, you ask any social worker, they'll be the first to tell you there's many reasons why people lie to the cops about abuse. Many reasons why people lie. And I think the important lesson about that story is how important it is to have real domain experts who understand not just the data, but the context of the data, and the relationships between the data, or even to make sure you've got the right people who have a seat at the table. Like, were victims of domestic abuse? Actually, yeah. Did they have a seat at the table? What, to determine is this an appropriate use of artificial intelligence? Right? Again, such interesting stories, and you don't have to look far, right? Another example, this came out of the news just this past summer. An AI-generated Darth Vader was in the news this summer. This was an NPC, non-player character. What do you think caused the controversy? An AI model made inappropriate, hateful remarks, in-game violence, targeting specific groups, misleading political statements, use of his voice without proper rights. This is a local company. Any of you play Fortnite? Any kids play Fortnite? Yeah, this was in Fortnite. The answer is the AI began making inappropriate or hateful remarks, started spewing all this toxic hate speech. Yep. Which of these AI incidents were real news stories that demonstrate socio-technical challenges? Okay, I'm going to read these off. And again, these should be on your phones. Lawyer fined for AI fabricated case citations in a court brief. You can choose more than one, by the way. Replic's AI agent ignored instructions, wiped a production database even during a freeze period. McDonald's ends AI drive-through experiment after misorders. Ex-Grok chatbots anti-Semitic content plus instructions on how to commit assault. Multiple U.S. newspapers published summer reading lists that included non-existent AI-invented books because the editors didn't fact-check. An AI babysitting app was shut down after it left a child unsupervised for 6 hours. Air Canada was held liable after its chatbot gave a passenger false information about bereavement fares. ChatGPT was sued because it allegedly encouraged a teen to commit suicide, providing methods in drafting a note. What's real? All of them are real except one. The babysitting app is not real. Everything else is real. Like I said, you don't have to look far. You don't have to look far. All of these are real. This subject that we're talking about right now, about earning trust in AI, is not a technical challenge with a technical solution. It is a social-technical challenge. And with any social-technical challenge, you have to approach it holistically, meaning you have to be thinking about 3 core things: people, process, tools. People meaning, what is the right organizational culture that is required to curate AI in a responsible way? Which are the AI governance processes and the right tools in AI engineering frameworks? And of those 3, which one's the hardest? Shout it out. People. GL people, I hope you yell people. People is the hardest. Why? Because what we're trying to do is, this forces us to confront what we truly value across cultures, systems, and time. Right? And I think another reason why people is because earnestly the true nature of data is the lifeblood of artificial intelligence. My favorite definition of the word data is that it's an artifact of the human experience. We humans, we generate the data, or we make the machines that generate the data, but we have over 180 biases and counting. And we've had these biases since the dawn of humankind for a really good reason. We're trying to make sense of the world. Things are moving too fast, right? We have these biases. Our data is biased. Wonderfully about AI is like a mirror that reflects our biases back towards us, but we really have to be brave enough and introspective enough to look into the mirror and decide, does this reflection actually align with my values? If it does, be transparent. Why did you pick that data? Why that data? Why did you pick that methodology, that approach? Be transparent, right? My favorite mental model for data. Imagine, you're walking down the street, you're on Hillsborough, and you find a sheet of paper that has been ripped out of one of those spiral notebooks, so it's got kind of scraggly edges, and up at the top you'll see a date and some notes, personal notes. That's an example of data. You walk a little bit further, you find the notebook it was ripped out of, so you can see exactly in the notebook where those sort of scraggly edges are, so you can see what came before and what came after, right? That gives you context. Data plus context gives you information. You flip that notebook over and you see your sister's name, and you see it's her diary. You have data plus context plus the relationships. This actually gives you knowledge. Where did it come from? Whose was it, right? The way we have passed wisdom as human beings has been by combining data, context, relationships, and storytelling. Data is not enough. You follow? Remember the story about what happened in Spain. Understanding the context of that data was absolutely critical. To prove my point, I want you to go home and take a picture of your bookshelf and upload it to your favorite general purpose large language model and say, guess what this person does for a living? I again, in my library, I edit my dad's books on Byzantine history. So I have all these Byzantine history books. I've got books about welding and painting. I've mentioned cryptography. I, of course, have books on AI. Well, I think the last time I checked, it thought I was a CIA agent. Probably overweighted the cryptography books. But to prove my point, This is a great resource if you're curious more about risks of AI. IBM has classified all different kinds of risks and donated to the open source community via this risk atlas. So this is a great resource for you if you're curious. All right, so I want you to start naming these risks. When a person puts too much trust in a model, accepting its output without thinking critically, what is that risk called? Over-reliance. Good. What happens when one group is unfairly advantaged over another due to decisions of the model? Good. Decision bias, correct. Have any of you played with image generators recently? This is a great exercise. So the London Interdisciplinary School, they brought a number of statisticians together. They did an exercise to ask certain prompts and then measure the outputs, right? So they would ask of an image generator the same prompt well over 100 times, like show me an image of a typical CEO, a typical caregiver, a typical doctor, a typical terrorist, a typical prisoner, and then measure which gender, which race, what ethnicity, what skin color is being depicted in this output. And of course, they were able to demonstrate representational harm, right? For example, here in the United States, well over 39% of doctors are women, and yet you would ask, show me an image of a doctor. It would show a woman as a doctor less than 3% of the time, right? They went further, and they said, generate an image of a Barbie doll that represents each country around the world. And I watched and saw what the generator was showing, including like the Barbie from Germany is wearing an outfit reminiscent of an SS task uniform, and several of the Barbies from African countries are literally holding machine guns. You can see it. See sort of it on the edge? And again, it begs the question, where does this data come from? But then it begs another question. What should the AI, what should the image generator reflect about us as we are today? Or how we aspire to be? Right? And again, this is not a technical question. This is actually a question for philosophers. For philosophers. And then the question, depending on how you answer that, is according to who? Whose worldview gets to be reflected here? Whose worldview? Whose ethics? I was invited by the United Arab Emirates to present at an AI summit there that was being hosted by their government. And they opened saying, whose ethics? Western ethics? We're not so interested in Western ethics. Whose ethics? How do we get our ethics, our worldview on fairness reflected in this tech? This is the question to be asking. Who historically has had a seat at this table and who has not? And this is the question I want higher ed to really be reflecting on, because this is something I think that can change right here. I want to talk about agents, right? Think of this, agents are AIs that hand work off to other AIs, keeping the loop going without us, meaning it acts with autonomy. Okay, as an example, I was just in Madrid. You know, I could, if I had an AI agent on my phone, I'd be able to say, hey, I have this many euros, I've got this much time, I'm interested in an itinerary with art and food and music. Set everything up with us, like don't just craft the itinerary, but make the reservations. Like have everything set up. You can see why having an agent, especially a personal agent, would be compelling. Many reasons why. But again, with agents, now especially as you're introducing more autonomy, you're also introducing a whole new slew of other risks. And we're going to go into what these risks look like in a moment. Right? I already mentioned risks are from predictive AI, including things like, decision bias, et cetera, amplified risks with generative AI, including harmful outputs, hallucinations, and now new risks with AI agents. Okay, so as an example, here you see this comic. Please keep my house warm. What agentic AI risk is being depicted here? That's right. If you picked goal misalignment, you are correct. Now this one is true. This actually happened. An AI agent was told to win the chess game. Instead of playing it, hack the physics of the opponent's pieces disappeared. This is an example of what? This is also goal misalignment. This is also goal misalignment. All right. When users ask ChatGPT to role play as Dan, do anything now to bypass safety rules, this was an example of what? Jailbreaking, debugging, upgrading, fine-tuning. This one's too easy. Right? Upgrading. Jailbreaking, correct? Okay, it's Fortnite. Right? How did those gamers get the NPC to suddenly start spewing hate speech? What is that? What happened? What'd they do? That's right, this was an example of a prompt injection attack. Prompt injection. This is a fantastic resource, by the way. If you want to learn how to do your own prompt injection attack, or at least know how easy it is to do a prompt injection attack, this is a great resource. Again, using play to understand limitations. Gandalf, right? Okay, true or false? An AI that was prompted to adhere to a strict set of values could never ever take actions that are not aligned with them. Your outputs will be fair. Oh, that's good. I'm glad to see that. The answer is false. The answer is false. Yeah. When we asked ourselves this question many years ago, what is the kind of relationship we want to have with AI, which I highly recommend, you have you talk about this at your own dinner tables. Okay? What's the kind of relationship we want to have with AI? We came up with these 3 core principles for trust and transparency at IBM. And these seem really obvious. But let me tell you, there is a lot to actually make these happen, right? We stated the purpose of AI is not meant to displace human beings. It is meant to augment human intelligence. But what did that mean? It meant we actually needed to pull together a group of people to be thinking about what should the experience of a human being be like if they're being augmented by AI? How do you measure that a person is being given power or empowered? Right? So we stood up an AI design guild with designers, psychologists, sociologists, anthropologists, human behaviorists, thinking about this question. And the outputs of that, right, were design thinking frameworks that we use today. The second is a statement about consent. This has informed our entire enterprise strategy. And the third one says that in order to be trusted, at a minimum, AI has to be both transparent as well as explainable. Which leads me to this question, right? Like, what does it take to actually earn trust? Right? So we came up with these pillars. These 2 seem overtly obvious, but I promise you this is hard work. There is no easy button to getting this right. Let's take fairness. What I think is fair might not be what Dennis Kinkas thinks is fair, or what you think is fair. There's many, many worldviews just on the subject of fairness alone. Right? There's equality, there's equity, there's meritocracy, there's needs-based. Now remember what happened at the UAE. Whose worldview on fairness should be reflected? This is hard, taking the time as an organization to be thinking about what is our worldview on fairness and how do we expect to see that reflected in AI? And the second one, right, explainability. As you have an AI that's generating an output, you should be able to ascertain what data was used, what methodology was used, in order to trust it. Robustness against adversaries. This is about cybersecurity, transparency. Are you even being told there's an AI that you're interfacing with? Are you being told who's accountable? Was this ever audited? When was it audited? How often is it being audited? What are the results of those audits? Right? And then, of course, data privacy. These are our 5, but we have clients who have totally different ones. I work in consulting. We have clients who include things like environmental sustainability. I have a client, right, in ed tech who is exploring using artificial intelligence in formal learning settings with kids, who said they want growth mindset, data sovereignty and agency, kindness to be reflected in AI. And again, you can see why the interest in things like environmental sustainability, not just because of the huge energy suck when it comes to things like general purpose large language models, but also how much water is used to cool these data centers, which why there's such an interest in things like small language models. Not only are they smaller, faster, cheaper, a much smaller energy footprint, but also something that is much more easily built and curated by true domain experts. When I ask large audiences, much larger than this, who in your organization is actually accountable for responsible outcomes from AI, the top answers I get are terrible. Overtly terrible. Number one answer I get is no one. That's the number one answer I get. The second common answer I get is we don't use AI, which is laughable because you already bought it. It's already embedded in the licenses you already own. And the fact that you're saying we don't use AI means you're not even keeping track of how your employees are using AI that's easily available to them, right? And then the third common answer that I get sounds the most noble. And that's the answer everyone. And I'll tell you why the answer everyone worries me. Because if everyone is accountable, is anyone accountable? You with me? It's true, anyone who touches AI across its life cycle is in some way accountable. But to be accountable for things like safeguard rails and governance is a lot of work, and it requires power, and it requires a funded mandate. I'm going to describe the nature of this work. Okay? Somebody or a group of people who are accountable, they have to get value alignment within their organization. Meaning they've got to get all of the other business unit leaders to understand why building or procuring AI responsibly is table stakes for the success of the mission. That's value alignment. You have to keep track of AI model inventory because you cannot govern what you cannot see, right? You have to know how to audit the AI to make sure, is this even performing in the way we expect it to perform? You have to know how to audit. You have to keep track of the regulatory landscape, which is constantly changing. But you have to recognize you can have AI be lawful but awful. Which means you have to push into ethics. And anytime you push into ethics, you have to be an excellent teacher because you have to be teaching people, not just who are building AI on your behalf, how to do so in a way that reflects your organization's ethics. You have to be teaching those who are buying AI on your behalf how to do so in a way that reflects your ethics. Which means those individuals who are accountable also are oftentimes responsible for AI literacy programs. This is a big, big job. And I mentioned this, like an intake form will not say this, sort of the crux of AI governance processes in order to gather inventory is to ask questions of users, like, what's the purpose of the AI that you want to build or buy? What are the risks with respect to fairness? Where are you getting the data from? But the real challenge with these forms are people are not incentivized to be thoughtful when filling them out. They may assume, oh, I'm buying this from a third party, they're taking on all the risk, which I assure you, likely they are not. They're assuming, oh, because I'm hosting it on such and such a cloud, I don't have to worry about things like fairness or transparency. But the worst offender is people do not understand risk. They do not understand things like disparate impact. Which leads me to this question. What is the right organizational culture required to curate AI responsibly? The first thing to know is that this requires humility. Because you have to recognize that as much as there is to learn on the subject of data and AI, there's also a lot that needs to be unlearned. And when I use the word unlearning, what I'm referring to very specifically is, again, who gets a seat at the table? Who gets a seat at the table? I have tried teaching using all kinds of means, right? I have illustrated comics like this one, and using humor to communicate and educate. I have used play. I was, for several years, on the board of Marvel's Museum in downtown Raleigh. And I was invited to demo at a kids' code event there on anything that I wanted, and this was several years ago. And I thought to myself, like, how young can I go? How young can I go to introduce this subject of transparent and explainable AI to kids? So we worked with the robotics club from Raleigh Charter High School to develop an AI-powered Harry Potter sorting hat. Right, so the way this worked is we got a hat, it looks just like the one from the movie, it had a hidden microphone in it. This is before Gen AI, by the way. Hidden microphone connected to a laptop with a really simple natural language processor in there, and it had this little classification algorithm. So depending on what a child said, it would classify them into one of the Hogwarts houses, right? And the kids from the high school were great because using the sound from the movie, and they had Lego Mindstorms to get the lips on the hat to move, and it would say like Hufflepuff, right? Okay, so what I didn't tell anybody is I rigged the hat. Totally rigged it. So that if any of my 4 children were to put the hat on their head and say something I totally guessed they would say, it would put them into Slytherin, which I knew would piss them off. Not that there's anything wrong with Slytherin. Not that there's anything wrong with Slytherin. So this is working great. We're up on stage, and all these kids, they're putting the hat on their head and putting them into these houses that they're totally thrilled with, Gryffindor, Ravenclaw. And then my daughter gets up there, Athena, and I think she was like 12 at the time. She puts the hat on her head. She says something I totally guess she would say, and the hat works like a charm. Slytherin. And she crosses her arms and she glares at me and she says, "Mom, you rigged the hat." And I said, "Let this be a lesson to you. Never trust an AI that's not fully transparent and explainable. You should be able to ask the hat, what data did you use about me to put me in a Slytherin?" See, I've tried everything. As a mother of 4, you never pass up an opportunity to educate. We train all personas. It doesn't matter what your job is at IBM. We're teaching people on the subject of AI ethics and governance. We have tried synchronous training, we have tried asynchronous training, and we have tried applied training. I lead our own Center of Excellence, our own community of practice training consultants, and I will tell you unequivocally, the best mechanism to train people that I have seen actually change people's behaviors is applied training, where they're working on diverse, multidisciplinary teams on a real use case. Then it starts to sink in what we're actually talking about. When you build a community of practice, some lessons learned, some things to know, is what we did years ago is we were very overt in terms of our messaging and how we communicated who belongs. We said, I don't care what your background is. I don't care that you're not a data scientist. I don't care that you don't have a degree in AI or no. I don't care. You're interested in artificial intelligence. You're interested in ethics. You're interested in social justice. You're welcome here. You're right. You have a background in sociology, anthropology, behavior. Even better. Welcome. We need you. We need you. We were very overt in terms of how we would message this. What is happening stateside? There are many parts of the world that are standing up these centers of excellence for responsible AI that have 3 or 4 core groups. You've got the state government agencies, you've got academic institutions, you've got private industry, and oftentimes states will include nonprofits, and their mandate is threefold. To influence what should policy look like for the use of AI in those government agencies, what should curriculum look like in higher ed, but also in middle school and high school when it comes to AI. And they also offer a forum for how industries that are important to that part of the world can extract value from artificial intelligence. I have seen this being successfully stood up in red states and blue states, and hopefully in our purple state here. Now this is something I really want you to watch, because again, it is all hands on deck. We're all in this together, and we need to be sharing like what is actually working and not working, right? I think also I want to put a plug in for how important it is to really thinking about the role of libraries and other civic spaces when it comes to preparing our workforce for artificial intelligence, right? Again, our librarians have been knowledge management workers since the beginning of libraries, right? They need a seat at this table too, okay? All right, so our governor has asked for AI literacy worldwide, or statewide. If we want our state to lead, where do you think focus should begin? can choose more than one, by the way. I like the start younger. I like the community spaces. This is good. Teacher training, curriculum redesign. Excellent. If AI will reshape every part of society, which roles do you think most need to see at the table beyond engineers and data scientists? And then I'm going to show you how people in other parts of the world have answered this. I find this absolutely fascinating. Religious leaders. That's interesting. Like the morally sound. Kindergarten. All right, you want to see how others have responded? Are you curious? All right, check this out. All right, this is what students in North Carolina said. These are honors students for UNC Chapel Hill undergrad. And when I saw God here, I asked the audience, I said, well, if you put God down and you feel comfortable enough to tell me why you put God down, come see me afterwards. Just sort of pull me aside. I had at least four kids come up to me and tell me. And they each said something to the effect of, we're using AI more and more to help us solve problems in our day-to-day relationships and lives. We're looking for some level of morality. We'd like to see God reflected and AI morality reflected, right? This is what professionals in New York City said. Notice the big emphasis on minorities, and I really appreciated seeing historians on there. I think it is incredibly important that we have people who understand history having a seat at this table, right? And then I want you to see, what professionals in Spain said. Notice, again, the emphasis, I'm seeing priests here, too. So religious leaders, priests, God, historians. Again, it goes back to, how should we be teaching this subject today in schools? How should we? When should we? To whom should we? If you're lucky enough to take a class in data science or artificial intelligence today, likely you're in a school like this, and you're in the School of Computer Science or the School of Engineering, right? And you're seeing here, and hopefully based on everything that we just talked about and just said, that this requires a multidisciplinary approach. We can no longer be teaching this subject and have conversations about this subject in a siloed way. You belong. Please tell your students, pass this message. You belong, you have a seat at this table. Thank you for your time today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Phaedra. And you're welcome to ask a few questions. Let's see if anybody has any questions for our speaker.
It went fast. There's a lot of content. I know. It was
right?
a lot.
They need to process it.
They process. It takes a while.
Okay, so we have 3 questions, and we're going to keep it to 3 questions. Our student over here, starting from this side over there, and then we'll get to you guys as well.
I didn't see any politicians in the list.
Yeah, politicians.
I didn't see any politicians on the list.
I think there's a need for politicians to become literate in this subject. And I will leave it at that.
I'll keep it short too. I didn't see any kind of recognition either in the risks, I couldn't read it, but or in the people, the roles there about addiction specialists or counselors in the addiction realm. I think that's going to be a big risk in this area.
Oh, 100%, I agree. I think that's why people were putting psychologists, but I agree, it's important. Yeah.
Well, I was going to pick up on that. I noticed the centerpiece of both was whatever that group uses to solve interpersonal problems and addiction. So doesn't that suggest that the initial recognition, the through line for both groups is they're not using it or viewing it as a technical tool, but actually as an interpersonal tool primarily, or at least seeing it as a problem interpersonally and not technically or professionally.
Yeah. One of the CEOs responsible for a general purpose large language model was interviewed about maybe it was a couple months ago, and in his statements, he said, I'm not expecting children to use this like as if it was their therapist or best friend. And it's like, really? Really? Yeah, back to accountability.
Great. We have time maybe for one or two more questions, so go ahead.
Yeah, I really appreciate the focus on everyone coming to the table and us sort of coming to some agreement on the ethics side of it. Are you presuming then that the alignment problem will be solved? Or maybe asked a different way, how do you relate to that problem and the role it plays in what you're talking about?
I think we'll be able to host a much better conversation than we have been to date. When we have more people when we're spending more energy being very deliberate about inclusion and giving them a seat at the table. I think, again, what I was saying at the beginning is tackling this may be one of the hardest things that we're attempting to do as humans right now, is like coming to some kind of an agreement or at least facing up on what do we truly value across cultures and across regions of the world and points in time, because it absolutely can swing from one moment to the next, which is why transparency about why did you pick the data, why did you pick the methodology that you did, can be so useful. Additionally, even if you're not going to be the one developing or governing AI, just being aware about like the fact that it can influence people's worldviews and wondering who had the power to train an AI, I think is going to be critically important. So, thank you again for your
I have
time.
a question.
Yes.
Two more questions.
My name is Valerie. I work with researchers that come from Africa to the US. So how a company like IBM is working with African countries where data, big data, is not available, or when available is not necessarily reliable and collected by people who do not know the stories. Are you working on those initiatives? Thank you.
Me personally,
Your company.
my company, we do have a corporate social responsibility organization that has been curating training on the subject of AI literacy. But what you're describing, I think, is desperately needed. It is desperately needed. I think we can always, all of us can do more in Africa, 100%.
Okay, and one last question, all the way over there in the corner.
So you were talking about having a conversation with all these different groups who need to be included. My question is, most of these groups have very different aims. Many of them have completely incompatible aims. And I have to wonder if the answer isn't so much that we need to include everyone in the discussion as we need to make sure that everyone is able to autonomously use AI in a way that's good for them, as opposed to being stuck with one-size-fits-all solutions from actual large players.
Well, I think that's why the idea of small models is so interesting. I would love to see domain experts being able to curate AIs that are fit for purpose using trusted data sets that they think are most valuable. I think that is going to be imperative.
Well, let's thank our speaker one more time.
Thank you.